Well, Mike's
Well, he's not here, so I think I took that job over. Good morning.
Good morning, teacher.
This is Showmanship in Square Dance class, or Teaching for Fun with Showmanship. My name is Betsy Gotta, and Mike Sikorsky was supposed to be the moderator. He was not able to be present, so I get to be both moderator and panelist. So to introduce myself, my name is Betsy Gotta, and the next presenter is Betsy Gotta. Betsy has been calling for longer than the chairman of the board of CALLERLAB has been alive. She is a member of the Board of Governors of CALLERLAB and an accredited CALLERLAB caller coach, and she comes from New Jersey. Thank you, Betsy. And the other panelist is Andy Shore, and Andy has been calling for how long?
16 years.
16 years, and he recently moved to Florida and survived all the hurricanes, and I noticed that he likes the Florida sunshine with his shirt. I think it's too early in the morning for this shirt, so I borrowed these sunglasses. For the tape, the shirt is bright gold, and this is 9 a.m.
Showmanship and panelists.
And seriously, one of the things about showmanship has to do with spontaneity, and I have a whole outline of stuff, and I'm going to start with the spontaneity because that can work in your favor, and then you use that later on. I went down to breakfast this morning, and I happened to notice Andy at the next table, and I noticed the color of his shirt, and I went, boy, that'd be great. I'll come in with some sunglasses on and say, I can't look at them. I don't have any sunglasses here. The sunglasses actually belong to Christy Jacobs. So I ran around and found some sunglasses, and here I am. I'm ready, Andy. So something that happens on your floor as you're teaching, you can turn it into fun. Going back to a class I taught in the 1980s, I was teaching Past the Ocean, and I was trying to be very careful to do it correctly by the definition and say, pass through, face your partner, step to a wave. I didn't want to teach the ladies to catch left hands and turn a quarter and the men to move around the perimeter because that won't work in all situations. And we know it's tougher to teach it the right way, but it pays off in the end. So I'm going through this, and everybody was doing it perfectly until I gave the call the name. And I said, past the ocean, and I had waves going every which way but loose and people all over the place, and I went, okay, what happened? Let me see this again. So we did it by the definition, directionally again, and everything was perfect. And I said, okay, now I'm going to watch and see if I can figure out what exactly is happening past the ocean. And I watched, and the people stepped forward and made an ocean wave in the one square. They didn't pass through. Into my head pops the comment, oh, it's like a date I had in high school. The guys are grabbing the girls too early. It took us 5 minutes to regroup the squares so we could continue, but the line has stayed in my repertoire. It happened spontaneously, and those people are going to remember the past the ocean as the one that you don't go like the date in high school. One guy came up to me after the tip and said he didn't remember being in high school, so I made him feel younger again. Let me see if okay. So I started right with humor. Now, humor is a dangerous tool, and you need to not use it in a manner that makes fun of the dancers but makes fun of the situation or yourself. Sometimes it's not what you say but how you say it. One of the things that I can get away with, I'm not sure if the men can do this or whatever it may be because I'm a female, but I'll be calling away and something will happen. I'll go, can I look yet? And I'll cover my eyes and peek. Now that you guys may or may not be comfortable doing that, but it works for me. The way you say something is like, oh my, that wasn't exactly what I expected. Or, that was exciting. Look at John Jones here. Every time he stands at this convention and goes, not funny. And that's my poor John Jones imitation, but the whole point is It's how you say it. It's how you deliver it. I can't stand there and be as deadpan. I'm not as tall. I don't have as deep a voice. I can't be as deadpan as John Jones and go, not funny. It's not going to be as funny for me to say it as it is for him. So part of use of humor is finding what works for you. Part of showmanship is finding what works for you. Another comment that I use is, scared me too. Usually that happens right after the square. They didn't actually break down, but boy, they were right on the edge, and then they grabbed somebody got somebody's hand, and they all fell into place, and I'm going, well, scared me too, I'll tell you. So that's one of the things. Now, talking about positive applications, my dancers on my floors that I call for, never make mistakes. They do creative applications of my choreography. Sometimes I have been known to tell them I'm taking notes because I'm going to use this the next place I call, and they're going to think I'm really kinky and it was all you guys that did it for me. Don't be mean in your humor. The reason you use humor in teaching is because new dancers, new class people are scared to death. If we had a class in this room and they were dancing away and one of these chandeliers dropped from the ceiling, there would be at least one person and probably more people who would think that it was something they did that caused that chandelier to fall. And I am not kidding. It's funny, but it's true. They are so fragile. A few years ago, a friend of mine was learning to call, and I was trying to do some caller coaching one-on-one. So what I did was I would go out to her lesson and dance as an angel, and then I could critique her, what we set up. Because she is a very sensitive person, I would actually write my critiques down and send them to her so she could read them in the privacy of her own home. So I'm dancing away one day, and she was doing a singing call. And the guy next to me was like, what's that, what's that, what's that? I said, that's the lyric. You don't have to do that. He was so nervous that he didn't hear that she was just singing the song. He thought it was a call because he was so scared he couldn't focus on the words. And I've always said how fragile new dancers were, but that brought it home to me again. This man was petrified. He thought square dancing was fun, but he was still petrified. Find out what works for you. Anecdotes. Some of my anecdotes happened like the sunglasses this morning. They happened to spontaneous things in the past of the ocean. Recently, I was substituting for Mike Jacobs. Mike is doing a square dance class in a gated community, so the people are all 55 or over. And he has had a different commitment one night, so I went out to the class. Excuse me. It's dry in this hotel. So I went out to the class, and I don't know these people as well because I don't see them every week. I see them occasionally. So we were chatting. I'm trying to find out their names because I work better when they're doing their names. And they were asking about square dancing for younger people. Did they get younger people in? And I said, well, we're trying very hard, but it is very difficult. And we discussed how people with families, they're so busy ferrying the kids around, they don't have time to come out and square dance. You can get younger people, and since I took early retirement, I work in the schools whenever I can. I take school gigs where I'm doing like a whole day of phys ed classes, all the classes, one after another. I have all the teachers for support, and I just keep going out, and I try and use music that would relate to the students. Now, do I have that disc with me? Of course not. It's up in the room. So there is a piece of music called the Tush Hoedown. And it's based on a ZZ Top song called I'm Going Downtown and Get Some Tush. For those of you who are not in the northern or New York area and are not sure what that means, it means derriere or rear or the back of your front. So it's a term used, a slang term. So we were talking about this, and I played the piece of music for them, and it's kind of a heavy metal sort of sound a little bit. And I said, would you guys like to try dancing to this? And they said yes. So I'm teaching square through. I was reviewing square through, and I was trying to do square through two hands, and they were not pulling by and adjusting, so they were back to back. Well, Tush Hoedown back to back, and I thought, head square through 2. Now make sure you go through. Now everybody back up and check for the tush. It got the point across. I never would have thought of it had we not been discussing the high school and gone to the piece of music, etc. It's going to stay in my repertoire. Now I can use it with head square through 2 because the person they're backing up to bump rears with should be their original partner, so I'm not going to get in any trouble with somebody doing something that they don't want to with someone other than their original partner. Let's see, where am I? Oh, I did the Pass the Ocean. I used to teach mainstream for a club on a college campus. So one of the things that I found was, and I know all of you have seen it, when you do a cloverleaf, when people are one behind the other, the trailing dancer scrambles around and manages to get in front. And we can talk about don't do that, etc. And I came up with something one night spontaneously that I use all the time. I said, okay, look, you don't want the back person to get in front. Envision this. You're driving down the highway on your Harley, and you're the passenger. Now, if you're the passenger and you're going down the exit ramp at about 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, who knows, if you're on the Harley, you may be pretty daring. Would you, as the passenger, scramble and climb over your driver's shoulders and wrestle the handlebars away from them? No, because you'd be road pizza. So don't do it here either. The results are not as drastic, and there are no sidecars, so don't come up beside them either. Because envision this, if you're the passenger and you're getting off the cloverleaf exit, you're kind of flapping in the breeze if you're up beside them. Stay behind the behind that you are behind. And don't make me say that again. All of these are things that I have developed to use. You can try them out at home, see if they're comfortable for you. It all depends on where you are. Andy's taking notes. Okay. Zoom. Andy, would you stand up for a minute? Stand beside me. No, actually, we're beside each other. One of the problems with Zoom is getting the people to turn away from each other. So I came up with this idea. You and your partner are together, and you're going, it's like you had a little spat. So you look at your partner and you go, huh! And then you turn all the way around, which I am not doing because there's a microphone cord here, and then you immediately make up and are friendly again. And so if you see dancers going, huh! On Zoom, they probably came under my care or influence at some point in life. But it gets the idea across. You look, and then you turn away. So another thing that works sometimes, if you want people to turn in a certain direction, is to fling their hand out and follow the hand, which we'll get to what you're thinking later. I can see John Kay thinking of something that comes later. Okay, psychology, attitude. Teaching a class, we've talked about how fragile they are. We callers need to focus on being positive. I am always positive. I have a group of seniors who started dancing about 2 years ago. They dance a limited number of basic calls. Every time I introduce a call, it is like total chaos for a while. I know it's all going to work through. They get discouraged. I'm going, wait. Remember when we did Call A. Remember, that took a while to get so it got comfortable. So this is going to happen the same way. You cannot be upset with yourselves. It will fall into place. You need to focus on the fact that it will work after a while. Not right now. Yes, there's confusion, but focus on that. And we as callers need to actually keep reminding the dancers that they will get this. Even if we believe they may never get this, we need to keep reminding the dancers that they will get this, because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you present it as something, if the dancer says, I will never do this, they will be right. If you keep saying, yes, you will, then maybe you will be right, and you will change their image of themselves. And that, it's psychology, and it does work. And you can think back, and, you know, sometimes we get discouraged. There are the nights when it's like, what did I say and why did I do this? It isn't working. Think back. Last year this time it may have been the same thing, or maybe a previous year. Sometimes if you do classes and you take notes so that you have records of what happened, you can review and go, yeah, that happened before. It's nothing I did. It's not even the full moon. Class members are often harder on themselves for their mistakes than you are, and you have to redirect their focus. And one of the things that I found is that the higher the person's status in their private life, even if they're retired, if they were the CEO, if they were the general, if they were the drill sergeant, even people used to being in control, if they're the foreman rather than the worker, they are going to think that there is something wrong with them if they don't get it right away. I'm the CEO. I'm smart. I should be able to do this immediately. And they will be so focused on the fact that they didn't do it immediately that they will shoot themselves. They're literally shooting themselves in the foot. And you have to say, look, it will happen, and you need to be patient with yourself. And the more, and I will tell them, I say, the more that people, some of the worst people to teach are teachers. They're no longer, they're in command. They're used to being in command. So I'll say, look, if you guys aren't getting this right away, you need to refocus, because basically what's happened is you're used to being in command and you haven't given up control yet. And because you're so smart, you're not yet listening. It's not because you're not getting it because you're stupid. It's because you haven't given me control yet. You're used to being in control. And it must be because you have a very high status job. This way I've just hopefully built their egos back up so they're not being upset with themselves. It's all psychology. And then we have what I've been doing at home, which is the Olympic finish. Now, if you watch the gymnasts and skaters especially, I love watching the gymnasts and skaters when the Olympics are on. And they go into their routine, and how many hours have they devoted to practicing, to learning this, all this stuff, and they get, 4 minutes on the ice or one routine, and it's win or not win. And if they fall down, do they start crying and do they get off the ice? No, if they're still conscious and not bleeding, they get up and they finish their routine, and at the end, they finish with pride. You watch them, and I think actually they take off points if they don't finish. So we were at a dance for new students, like a halfway dance with multiple callers, which is always a very unnerving situation. These people are scared to death anyway. There's 8 or 9 other voices other than their own caller. They all say things differently. It doesn't sound like what they heard. It must be different words entirely. And they're scrambling around and they're going, I must be wrong. They're talking to themselves. So I got up and I could see everybody was tense. And I said, look, square dancers are way too hard on themselves. And I talked about the Olympics and all that stuff that I just gave you about the skaters and the gymnasts. They get up and they finish. Remember the young woman skater from the U.S. team a few years ago, and she did the vault, and her foot was sprained. She landed on one ankle and finished, and then was carried off. And I said, okay, square dancers need to focus on the fact that you got home and you didn't hurt anything, no one's bleeding, and if you don't get exactly the right partner, as long as you got somebody, finish. Well, the whole room was walking around finishing. I actually used this in the Canadian National Convention in the C1 hall because there were some new C1 dancers, and I was trying to relax, and it was the last half hour. Everybody's tired, so I talked about the finish. I found out the next day that this was Friday, all day Saturday, the C1 dancers finished. So try it at your clubs. It will make people feel better about themselves and more comfortable. Now, music. One of the things that we use in our showmanship, and a lot of showmanship in class is the same as showmanship for any performance. You know, classes are still, should be, to me, a class should be a dance interrupted slightly by some teaching and some review. And to me, what I do for showmanship in class, a lot of it is the same thing I would do at a dance when I'm talking about music, except for some of the music selection. Because of the fact that they have to focus and concentrate, I cannot use my best patter records when I'm teaching. For the teaching tips, I have to use more calm music with less instrumentation perhaps, because they'll be busy getting into the music and they'll forget to actually focus on the new call. So that would be detrimental to what I'm trying to do, detrimental to my goals. So you use the exciting pattern music for the first tip. That, for me, my structure in a class is the first tip is like a warm-up tip. Everybody is not focused yet. I need to get them back into square dancing. It may have been a week since they were here. They may be still focused on the cab driver that cut them off or whatever. They need to get involved in the dance again. So it's a relaxing time. I would probably use material, except for the first 3 weeks when I can't, I probably use material that is no more, or is all more than 2 or 3 weeks old. The new stuff doesn't come till later. And they're just supposed to get back in and get the feel of the dance. So that's when I can use some really snappy pattern music and get them involved. Singing calls. And then you have a warm-up tip and maybe any non-teaching tips where they get the feeling of wind in your face. So they're moving and they get the good patter. And the last tip of the evening, so you send them home with a positive attitude. Same thing. That's where you use your good pattern music when you're not teaching. Singing calls, I use every tip except the second tip. And that's because that's a review tip, and I set about 15 to 20 minutes for review. And once they've been on their feet for 15 or 20 minutes, a singing call is no longer dessert, it's punishment. I'm not going to punish people with a singing call. I want them to look forward to that. So it would be like feeding people 3 or 4 pieces of pie when they only wanted 2. While I was writing this, you see, if you see under music selection, SCORE, my husband Roy came up with this, and we created this acronym as I was developing the outline. SCORE, success. There are a lot of people who believe that you shouldn't, and it's good reinforcement to use the latest figure in your singing call. If it's a well-timed singing call pattern, the latest figure that they just learned, they are not yet quick enough to do it, and it will not be success. So the choreography in a singing call, to me, should be easier and not use the latest call taught. I used to be an advocate of that, and I've changed since about last 15 years. And to me, it should be more relaxing, and that's when you can add in the calls that you want to make sure you use every time, but you don't have to teach them, because one of the goals in teaching should be that every call that you have introduced should be used every single night more than one time. So if you put those calls that are comfortable in the singing call, that's how you add that call into your program, and it works for you. So success, the choreography can be easier. It uses the calls that they don't need review on. Good thing they don't have a video here. Be all over the place. My hands are waving like crazy. Confidence. Each time the dancers find their corner for the swing, they feel better about their dancing. And even more than that, each time the dancers finish at home with their partner, no matter how they got that partner back, they will feel better about their dancing. So if you, as a caller, have spotted creative applications upon your dance floor during the singing call, you can build the confidence simply by having the 4 ladies promenade inside, swing your original partner. They know that you're fixing them, but it doesn't matter. They still feel good. And that's what you want to do for them. Optimism. The class dancers should look forward to enjoying the singing calls. As I said, it should be dessert. It should not be a punishment. Relaxation. The singing call should allow the class to back off from the concentration of learning a new call, to kind of let their hair down and kick up their heels. So if we've had a particularly tough time with whatever call I've introduced, then I'm going to use a snappy singing call and really, 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 really easy choreography, so that they can just throw all that problem solving to the wind. Excitement. The dancers respond to the choice of music. And I like to use a variety of music to appeal to the different class members and angels. Some people always do an angel tip. One of the other ways that you can reward a faithful angel is by doing singing calls that you know they like. There's one guy that comes out to me in New York at Times Square, and he really enjoys doing the old standards, some of the old popular tunes, Que Sera, Sera, Bye Bye Blues. So if he has been out there and helping a lot, and maybe if he's had a really tough square, I'll make sure I do something that I know that he will enjoy for a singing call. He's an angel. He deserves that sort of thing. And I'll watch him. He'll all of a sudden brighten up because he likes the music that I'm playing, and it makes a difference. Okay, anything else I need? Oh, yes. Well, I made sure that I put the E in here. Do not always use the class as guinea pigs for your newest singing calls. Yes, they may be forgiving, and yes, you can do it sometimes, but they also deserve your A-level material and or your B-level material music. For those who don't know what I'm talking about with A and B-level material, when you are programming yourself, you know which singing calls you do the absolute best. Your partner will tell you. Your partner will tell you if you don't do something as well as you think you do. The ones that you do the best, the ones that if you had one shot on the biggest stage that you ever could imagine, you'd pick one of those singing calls, that's your A-level material. The B-level material is the stuff that you're comfortable with, but it's not your best presentation. The dancers in your classes deserve your A and B-level singing calls, as well as the people in your clubs. Andy Shore, you're next.
One, two. Okay. Thank you, Betsy. We all know that when teaching, the meat and potatoes are all the things we've learned about teaching techniques, learning styles, whether people are visual learners or auditory learners, or the people that need to read the definitions to understand it, or the people that need to see it. And we all incorporate that into our classes to accommodate different learning styles. Of course, we need to know the definitions, know the standard applications of the choreography that we're presenting. We can wrap all of that in showmanship to make the learning process an enjoyable one. And to me, my goal in using some of these techniques in a class situation is to set a mood in the class that is going to be conducive to enjoyment and learning. I don't, close order drill on a parade ground at boot camp is conducive to learning, but it's not enjoyable. And I really never want to feel like I'm drilling my dancers in a learning context. So, you can use music to set a relaxing and enjoyable mood. Have music playing as they're walking in the door, especially on the very first intro nights, so that they understand, they start to hear that and understand that. But I often do that all throughout a class period. Play music during the breaks, not blaringly. People want to be able to visit and socialize during the breaks, but it keeps the mood light. If the sound drops out of a room, it can suck the energy out of it too. I'll use music even in a class situation to theme a night and add a little dynamic to the evening. I'll say, there's a theme to tonight's singing call. See if you can figure it out and involve them in that. And after 3 or 4, they can figure out that it's all show tunes, or it's all tunes with city names, or travel tunes, that kind of thing. Or I'll ask them trivia questions about a song. Who had a hit with this in the 60s? What movie did this next song appear in? And extra credit. I'll say extra credit if you can tell me who's got that kind of thing. I will obviously use humor to lighten the mood, lift the mood of the floor if I feel things are going bad. Again, never at the expense of one of the students or even at the expense of the angels, hopefully, but usually at my own expense, or just humorous stories about, oh, this happened to me at a dance, or here's the story behind this call. Sometimes, if things are going south and squares are breaking down, I'll make a comment like, "Gee, I wish I could call what you're dancing," but it's never directed at a single person. It's directed at half the floor, so nobody's particularly embarrassed. Invariably on an early class night, somebody will have trouble with right and left. You'll say, make a right-hand star, and, you'll get 3 right hands and a left hand. And I don't want to single that person out, but I'll say, I'll just make the, we all think we learned right and left way back when we were in, kindergarten or first grade. I said, but it turns out you don't actually learn right and left until after you've learned to square dance. I said, I had a student once, and this is a true story, I had a student once who loaded on his shoes. He had a pair of boots. One said left. Oh, it was actually the left boot, and one said right. And so when he went on to advanced class, he wrote zag and zig on his boots. I tend to call mostly and teach for gay and lesbian clubs, and that affords me the opportunity to add a few more humorous things. But, the first time I get them into boy, boy, girl, girl lines, I say, notice we have boys together and girls together. This happens even in square dancing, just like real life, On the first nights when we ask them to choose whether they're going to learn the boys' part or the girls' part, I say, don't worry, this isn't a life choice.
I have been known to say that when they're in boy, boy, girl, girl lines, I also teach for gay and lesbian clubs, I've been known to say, why am I telling you that this is okay? And sometimes when you have new dancers and they are reluctant to be next to someone of the same sex, new straight dancers are reluctant to be next to somebody of the same sex, my line would be, it won't affect your private life.
Right. Right. As Betsy was saying, use funny phrases that you use frequently that they understand what you're talking about. When I talk about something that turns them around, I say it reverses your shorts. And I explain what that means the first time, and I notice that, it's reversed your shorts, so it's turned them around 180 degrees, and those kinds of things. In gay and lesbian dancing, when you might have 6 guys and 2 gals in a square, and you're teaching trades about boys' trade and girls' trade. You can't tell by looking who the other boys are in the square necessarily, or who the other girls are. There's no secret code. We don't wear bandanas or anything to identify that kind of thing. And I teach them to identify themselves and say boy, so that they can find the other boy that they need to work with, or so on. And then I tell the funny story that when I was a newer dancer, I went out to one of my first straight advanced dances with, I had a female partner for the evening. All night, we were in standard squares all night long, boys on the left, girls on the right. But all night long, when the caller would say boys trade, I'd go, boy, I was the only person in the hall doing this. I didn't even realize it for about an hour, and and then I got very embarrassed. Why am I, boy? Because they were all looking at me very funny, and it just didn't make any sense. But I tell that story, and it adds humor, it lightens the mood of the evening a little bit, and so on. If things are going south, I'll say, is it a full moon tonight? You can make a joke about the overall situation, again, not at the expense of anyone on the floor. Incorporate history and square dance history into your teaching. If you're teaching do paso, tell them a little bit about why, where that name came from, why it was there. I think that's all about showmanship. It's all about the history of our activity, and it imparts on the dancers some extra knowledge and, a little bit of that. Teach courtesies, and thanking your square at the end, where a courtesy turn came from, just sort of some of the square dance courtesies. Don't leave a square that's forming, and so on. I don't want to lecture them about that, but if the opportunity comes up in the normal course of teaching when I'm seeing squares form, I'll bring that in. Remind them about, hand pressure, we sometimes, and the lack of it. Sometimes people, the various things that we're all so used to about how much pressure to give, how much weight to give, are things that are new to, especially to nervous dancers, and you'll get somebody who's got the vice grip out there, that's going to wrench somebody's fingers off, and just gently remind them from time to time about that. And I teach styling. I work it in over the course of that. I teach, I'll mention skirt work even when I've got guys on the floor, and I say, I say in straight square dancing, the women usually wear these frilly skirts, and on, something like a ladies in men's sachet, they do this thing called skirt work, where they fluff it up, and I say, in gay and lesbian square dancing, it's usually the guys that are wearing the dresses, if anybody is, but we still do imaginary skirt work, and then I say, I want to hear the skirt work, so I want to hear the sound effect, the woo, and that, they love that, and then a few weeks later, when I do it and they forget it, I say, oh, come on, I want to hear the skirt work, and, you get a big cheer, and it boosts the whole evening for a while. I teach them the funny stylings on things like cut the diamond, the hi-ya, karate chop, or quacks on AC-doocy. It incorporates another aspect of fun and enjoyment into the dance, and there's no reason to do that. If you're having problems in the square up, you see, 3 of your less strong couples have squared up together, that's a good place to introduce scatter promenade. Call element left promenade, scatter around, find a different square, and it's a good way to mix the couples without embarrassing someone, without pointing it out. Those kinds of things. I use back to the singing call issue, there are certain things that I'm known for where I wind up with audience participation, and the club members know this. I do the singing called Blue that Deborah recorded, Blue, oh, so lonesome for you. And for some reason, my club started howling on the blues, like dogs baying at the moon. And I go with that, I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to use that. And I will do that occasionally in the class situation. And of course, the new students, the first time they see that, they're sort of taken aback. On the third chorus, I'll cut out and I'll drop the sound all the way down. So it's just them howling on the circle left or whatever it is, and so on. But, all of those are ways that you can incorporate aspects of showmanship. In your own dress, on the intro nights and the first few class nights, I dress up. I want to look like a caller. I want them to understand that they're at a special dance, that I'm someone special. And I will dress up in one of my nicest gray dance shirts and boots and so on. I won't tell off-the-cuff jokes because I don't want to offend anybody. I don't trust myself in those situations. But I have a canned shtick on the first few intro nights and so on of the things I do. But as they get to know me and they get to know my sense of humor, I will dress more relaxed usually as the course of a class goes on. I want them to feel more relaxed around me, and I'll feel more comfortable in letting my own personality and quirky sense of humor shine through. But I really don't, take chances on the first nights. I want them to feel that it's a more professional setting. As we get to know each other better, I want them to feel that it's a more collegial setting, and so on. I end every class in a big circle, right and left grand. After the final singing call, I will promenade them out into a giant circle and then have them out on left and right and left grand and say goodnight to everyone. And that's a great way to get them going out the door. And I usually don't do that at a regular club dance or an open dance, but I do that at every class as a way to say, and then I say see you next week to remind them that I expect them back, and so on. There's one other point about singing calls. Oh, I will often, do you walk through figures before you do singing calls sometimes? I often do that because singing calls...
For the tape, not usually.
I find that singing calls are panicky for newer dancers. The timing is tighter, the corner progression is hard for them to grasp early on, and I've learned that very often I don't usually use the new calls that I've taught that week. I'll defer those one more week, put those in the next week's singing calls usually. But if I look at what the figure I'm using looks like it's going to be at all difficult, I will do a walkthrough just once or twice through the figure so they can see the corner progression, get a sense of it, and get a higher success rate, which then, keeps them happy on the singing call. And
if I may interject,
sure.
Going back to when they were starting to get away from walkthroughs in square dancing sometime probably in the early 70s or so, one of the ways to get away from the walkthrough was to put it quote, in the patter call. So a lot of things that I think I'm going to put in the singing call, I'll do in the patter call before the singing call so that we get, unless I am absolutely sure that they're not going to fail, I will, I won't walk it through, but I will rehearse it in the patter call. I actually work partner changes in the patter calls before I ever do them in the singing call. I'll have them circle left and face your partner, or face your corner and do-so-do your corner. Now swing your corner and put them on the right and circle left. Now swing the next corner and circle left and swing the next corner and circle left. This would be early on in the classes. And now swing the next corner, who should look like your partner, or should look like your original partner, to tell them, yes, that's the person you started with, and yes, you did it right, and yes, you got them back. And I'll start something like that before I ever do partner changes in the singing call. So I'll build to it in the patter.
That's good. Don't ever tell them that something is hard, because that's setting them up for failure. Once they succeed, you can say, you did really well. That's one of the hardest calls we're ever going to learn, and they can feel great success. But if you say, this is the hardest thing we're going to do tonight, or this is the hardest call in square dancing, you're just setting them up to feel like they're going to fail. I don't do this. The other thing I found is they like to see me dance sometimes. So I will get out there with a cordless mic to demo some calls with a set of angels. If I'm demoing something, rather than putting a square together and me calling to the square of angels, I'll be one of them, so I can talk through it while I'm doing it. And they like to see me dance a little bit and do that. I found I've never had great success explaining Relay the Deucey, but showing it is great success. And I will dance it, and I will dance each of the 4 positions and talk about it while I'm doing it. And they watch an angel square dance about 97 Relay the Deuceys before they try it. But they sort of see my relationship to the adjacent dancer as we're doing the call, and I talk about that. And they love sort of following me through that is a great way to emphasize that. That's about it, I think, for what I have to say. Do we have any questions, comments? Please use the mic so it gets on the recording.
In the back. You want to run the mic? Yeah, I had something that jogged my memory that Andy said, but now I've lost it again.
Norm Wilcox, Ontario, Canada. On your comment about the hand, I heard somewhere, and I can't remember where it was I heard, but I've used it ever since. If I sense that the dancers are squeezing hands too tight, I will say, now, everybody face your partner, join right hands. Now, exert exactly 1 3/4 pounds pressure. And that gets the point across. The other thing I've done with arm turns, when I set up, first never do an arm turn, tell them put the hand against the lady's forearm and the hand around her elbow. I say, guys, now don't put your thumb over the top of the lady's forearm, because that'll hurt. And ladies, if this happens to you, if they do that, the first thing you do is you say, please don't do that, politely. If it occurs again, take your hand, yank the thumb back really hard. And gentlemen, if all of a sudden you get an agonizing pain in your left thumb, you know what's happened. Now I've got a question.
Yeah.
And this is a problem I'm finding recently. I don't know how I haven't had it before. The call right and left through. I dance them right and left through from home. I dance it from lines. I do it over and over. I do this for several weeks before I introduce right and left through from an 8-chain through formation. I get to that point, and it's like they've never heard the call before. Has anybody else had that problem? And if so, how did you fix it?
I do tell them that those coming into the center, ignore the people coming right at you. It looks like somebody's coming face to face with you and you're going to butt heads. I said, ignore them and make sure you look beside you for the courtesy turn. But I will have drilled them through. I won't set them up. That's not their first right and left through of the evening. Is from the 8-chain.
No, yeah, no, but. Because some people learn in tactile in relationship to where they are on the floor. For those people, the right and left through from an 8-chain through is an entirely new call for them. One of the things that I might do would be I'd set them up in the 8-chain through position, and then I might stop and say, okay, now each little group of 4 facing couples, just move away from the other people in your square to start, because that helps you to avoid temptation. The temptation is that when you do the right and left through, you should be courtesy turning the person next to you, but there's someone coming right at you and they are the temptation. And you need to avoid temptation. So I might move them away from each other so they can see the relationship and then put them back in the close 8 chain 3 position so they can practice it again from the same position. I haven't had a lot of that problem, but that would be some way, one strategy that I would use.
Doug Holmes from Ontario in Canada. Recently, over the past 6 or 8 years, I've run into a similar problem to Norm's. In my new dancer program, I use, long before I use right and left throughs, a couple's wheel around. Just heads pass through, wheel around. If you do that from the box formation, that seems to have a whole lot of success because they're handy with that from almost any position. I think that it helps too when you do get to the point of teaching a right and left through and a courtesy turn.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Something to consider.
I'm Bill Leiter from Lexington, Kentucky. And one of the things I do too is teach a lot of this in circles. Mm-hmm. So I'll have them like in lines and tell them to kind of move apart in the line, doing the right and left through. And then when I get them in circles facing couples, then I'll do some other moves and then have them do that. And then I'll have them pass through, maybe pass through again, go on to other couples, so that if there's one couple that's causing a problem or having trouble, they get somebody else to work with, and it helps straighten it out that way too.
I do a lot of teaching and review in 2 couple setups sometimes, and for me, it's a way to isolate dancers and sort of subtly impress upon them that a lot of these calls are not 8-dancer calls. They're 4 or 2-dancer calls, and they don't have to worry about the other half of the square. But for them, it's new and different, and that's part of showmanship. It's sort of like, wow, we're doing this only in groups of 4 instead of groups of 8, and that's something different. I don't overuse it. I do it every few weeks to reinforce some of the calls that we've already learned, or introduce some brand new call that's just a 4-dancer call, and I don't want them getting confused.
It's also a very useful tool, perhaps early in the evening when some of the folks haven't drifted in yet. Sometimes
right.
Class people drift in. Maybe you have 2.5 squares and you're really expecting 3, but the last 4 people aren't there yet. You could do 2 couple sets. Everybody can be dancing, and if you have angels there, you can utilize the angels in the different 2 couple sets. So it's a very useful tool.
But it's also sort of showmanship in that it's different.
Because showmanship is to me, part of showmanship is taking what could be a problem and turning it to your advantage. So that you look at something and you go, well, that could be a very big negative, and you say, how can I think out of the box? How can I turn it around and make it work for me? And that's part of showmanship. Not funny.
I agree.
The reply was, I agree. In a much lower tone than I can manage. Any other questions?
Andy, I have some. I think you're on. I just think it was Steve.
Sorry. Yes, I guess I was. Arnold Watts in Cedar Park, Texas. How do you use showmanship to diffuse a situation if you have like 6 couples taking a class, small class, you don't have any big classes, and you got this one couple that's never going to get it? I mean, you got the lady and the guy that they're 80 years old or 85 years old, and they want to do it, and the rest of the couples are starting to sense this, we're trotting along. Are there things that you can do to maybe help them? I mean, like I try to put them in a square with just all 3 angels and do that in a way that they don't realize that's what's happening, because the other new classes get with them, and it's frustrating because you get some that are really enjoying it and some that aren't. Is there some other things you can do to integrate them, or do you just run into a situation where they're not going to ever get it, and you still have to have them there every week, and they're going to upset the squares? And do you have ways to diffuse that through showmanship? I just wonder if there was any thoughts on that.
Let's see. There must be a beam. It's a chandelier. Watch it. It's going to fall. One of the things that I have developed as part of my personal calling style is ways to fix things. This takes a lot of practice, but I actually have developed enough practice time where if I look at a square, and maybe I have more than one square on the floor, but I have one square that has somehow managed to be creative, and they have achieved 3 ladies in one line and 1 gentleman, and 3 men in the other line and 1 lady, I can manage to fix that. And I can fix it while they are moving. This took me a lot of practice, trust me. But there are ways to isolate people. So maybe I would move the... Why don't I do it? I think that would be easier. Can I have a square? I have 2 guys. I have lots of guys. Any of you guys want to be ladies? All right, I need
a gal.
I think we have. I think we have an actual lady. If you one.
Sorry, Elmer.
Okay.
I wanted to do the skirt work.
All right, just for me.
Wise man.
Couple 1, roll away with a half sachet. And head couples, step into the middle, turn your back on your partner, and face your corner. Okay, now, I didn't call that to get them into this problem. Somehow the dancers did a much harder sequence than what I was calling, and now we have 2 ladies in the center facing a normal couple on the outside, 2 gentlemen in the center facing a normal couple on the outside, and the dancers somehow achieved this sort of setup. Okay, everybody step to a wave, because they might be new dancers, and the centers trade, just to get you moving, and swing through. And I'm going, oh my, that looks interesting. Centers run. Couples circulate. Now this is pretty far into class, obviously. Ferris wheel. Center 4, swing through. Okay, let's see. Everybody.
Yeah, red shirt's a gal.
I know. I have 3 men in the middle. In the middle, have the centers run. In the middle, wheel and deal. Centers pass through. Everybody star through. Bend your line. Yes, there will be flow glitch for some people, but I've now got normal lines. What did I do? I put the normal couples, I worked around until I had the normal couples facing the normal couples and the same-sex couples, who weren't supposed to be same-sex couples, facing the same-sex couples. The star through gives me a normal couple, and I had, if you notice quickly, 1 normal line and 1 two-faced line. The bend the line gives me a normal setup. So part of what I have developed to diffuse when we're having serious problems, and even when people are dancing and they're having problems, and I don't want to point it out because I know that they will actually, it's just minor lapse in concentration and I don't have to take it back. I can use that to fix the square without disturbing the other squares. This is something that took me several years to develop. I recommend that if you want to work on this, you go home and push checkers until you can come up with strategies, but that's one of the ways that I developed to defuse something like that. I can fix the group. I think we have a question here, Andy, hand raised. No.
Okay. On the same topic about, so what do you do when you have a couple that's not getting it? One thing I've learned is never to write anybody off. I've had dancers that, on the intro nights, I thought, God, this person's never going to get it. And they went on to become, competent C1 dancers and get it and dance smoothly and with good timing and so on. So, not everybody gets it at the same speed, but don't write people off.
But they do get frustrated.
Right. The other thing is, if I notice a problem on the floor where I'm doing we're introducing flutter wheel or we're reviewing it, and one foursome on one end of facing lines isn't getting it, and the other one is, I'll give them another chance with the same couple, and then I'll have them pass through and bend the line so they can work with the other people in the square and split that up a little bit, or set it up so that there's an angel in that foursome that can help a little bit, and so on. So, just sort of keep a good eye out. If I'm trying to set something up with good timing and flow, from a left-hand two-face line to bend the line into a flutter wheel, that's going to be smooth, but there's a hiccup on the floor somewhere, and I noticed that one of the squares, it wasn't smooth for them because somebody was, stumbled on the bend the line or something. I'll try to set it up again because I want them to experience the smoothness of that.
Yeah. Another thing you might try, if you've had them in the square with the 3 angels, you might try one tip, mixing everybody so they're not dancing with their partner, but mixed so that each of these people have angels, and then put them in different squares to see if one or the other works well with other class members with the angel to help them. Sometimes Sometimes if you have a couple that's having trouble and they're in a square with 3 angel couples, the angel couples are helping them so much the folks who are having trouble will never have to think and never have to stretch and never have to get it. They don't have to get it because you set them up to be pushed and shoved around. So if you separate them and move one or the other of them in with an angel couple to mix with the class, then they may be able to start surviving on their own. Part of putting them with all the angel class, you may or may not be subtle about it, but they may have figured it out, and they may be writing themselves off. So you need to try and maneuver them.
Let's go with Derek. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
My solution for that is I very much established the first, Derek Page, Denver, Connecticut. I established on the first night more of a community dance type program where I expect everybody to switch partners every tip, because different angels have different calls that they are very, very good at, and different angels have calls that are just their calls that they just don't like as much. And I established that first night, and my angels all agree with it, and they're very good about making sure the students switch off with who they're dancing with, and I have one couple and the rest are singles. That one couple, I went to them, I said, you know, you can dance together, but you're going to be at a disadvantage for everybody else. Please feel free to dance with each other one time a night, but split up as well.
If that's comfortable in your group and there's still couples that sort of come together, I'll encourage them to dance the first and last tips together, but to mix on the rest, so they still, you know, have that sense. But it's very dependent upon the group's sociability and so on.
I'm Mel Leiter from Lexington. One of the things that I've found too is people have different ways of learning. Some have to read it, some have to be shown how to do it, some can be told. And also there's sometimes some difficulties as far as hearing. And I'll talk to the couple, find out if I can discern what it is. And it may be something as simple as moving them up closer to the speaker or giving them a copy of the teaching material we're going to have them read it ahead of time, and then review it with them, and then have them feel free to come up if they have questions.
Yeah, sometimes if you chat with them, you can help determine their learning style by chatting with them, and then you can refocus your words so that you find some way to make sense with them. Next.
Okay, Dave Foley from Maui. I'm going to put in a little different terms what you've been saying, but as a caller, you need to ascertain what the problem is, whether it's a couple problem or a learning problem, but you need to ascertain what the problem is to see whether that person can go on. I had Bill Peters once tell me he had one person one time that he had actually go up and tell, please don't come back. But that's in all his life career, so you can imagine how many dances and teach people he taught, but only once did he have to say that. Most people can, but you need to ascertain the problem. The other thing I want to comment on is the use of Sicilian circle in your class. If you're having this problem, or people coming and drifting in later slowly, or you want to mix them, Sicilian circle is a way very quickly, as you know, can mix, pass through, to chain, switch around and around, and you can pass through again, and pretty soon they're on opposite sides of the room.
Right. For those who don't know the term, Sicilian circle would be a circle of couples facing each other, you know, some couples facing clockwise, some couples facing counterclockwise, and it's a contradance term, but it's very useful. So basically what you're doing would be two couple squares in a big circle, or two couple tips in a big circle. And one of the beauties of that is that early on, if you're teaching pass-through leaves people facing out from squares, so they don't like it. But if you pass through in a Sicilian circle, they go on to somebody new, so there's a positive reward. Was there a hand over here? Okay. John Coltenthaler.
Okay.
John Coltenthaler. Another older time call, perhaps, but scoot and scat, where you move just the men to a different square or the gals to a different square. Also as a way of breaking up problems and recognizing that there are certain combinations which don't work. But when you talk about Bill Peters telling one person they never make it, remember that you're starting to play with their lives. Better to sit down in private and talk to them and say, are you having a good time in square dancing, or maybe you're not quite ready for this, but don't tell them they can't make it, because you make them feel stupid, and that's not a good thing to do.
And sometimes it's just a matter of being patient, and this person learns slower. I had a person one time in a class, and he was older than the average person in the class. Of course, the average person in the class was in their 20s because I was on a college campus. This person was in, I think, late 30s. And I literally thought, and we were going zip, zap, zip through classes. We went to mainstream, 0 to mainstream every semester. And I literally thought this man was never going to get this until we got to swing through. And somehow swing through and all the ocean wave stuff made sense to him, and it didn't make sense to everybody else. And after swing through, everything else fell into place, and he's still dancing with me 25 years later. So it just is sometimes a matter of finding something. Any other questions, comments, or things you want us to show you? Don't walk over there.
No, I think I handled the mic.
Oh, okay.
This may bring me to a point that I forgot to make earlier, which is I'm not afraid of ending early on a class night. If things have gone swimmingly, they've gotten everything that I felt I needed to present that evening, they've gotten it really well, you know, but I don't want to tempt fate and keep pushing them and have the energy level or the success level go down. And if it means ending 15 minutes early and leaving them on a high, I don't have a problem with that. And I tell the board that ahead of time, that if things have gone well and I don't need any more time with them tonight, I'm going to I don't end half an hour early like we may be doing here, but I'm not embarrassed to just let them and say, we've done great tonight, I'm going to let you go, because I don't want to wear them out. And I'd rather them end feeling like they've reached great success than push them too hard and have the tone of the evening go down.
Trying to buy you some time. This is John Maris from San Diego, California. What do you do about either an angel or a student in the class who is maybe trying to help too much and pushing someone in the wrong direction?
Was that a comment? Do you have an answer?
On the mic.
Yes. Get past the mic.
It's name. Yeah, Mike Sanita from Erie, Pennsylvania. It's as much trying to help or being too pushy, being physical with other dancers, that is also can be a problem. And I haven't found a solution for that, so if you would help me with that, I'd be appreciative.
Well, if I have an angel who is being too pushy, right or wrong direction, I will talk to them off to the side and speak to them in the breaks and tell them, please, or I have class coordinators. I work for clubs, and the class coordinator may help me in chatting with an angel. I had someone in New York who was also a caller. He was coming out to angel, and he was basically kind of trying to take over while I was teaching. And I spoke to the class coordinator, and I said, would you please tell this person not to do this? Next time I will tell him, and next time I will ask him not to come back. I don't want to do that with an angel, but I might. And, if you can't just be neutral, be there when you need to be, but don't push. Sometimes if you focus they're trying to be helpful. Oh, and that reminds me of something else in perception. And I saw your hand. I'll get to you in a second. The angels are trying to be helpful. And if you observe at halfway dances or classes, you observe some people's concept of being helpful. They're screaming at folks. They think they're being helpful. They're pulling. They're tugging. They're shoving. And the new dancer really feels like they were mauled. And if you ask the angel person, they would say, well, I was just trying to help. They have no idea of what they are doing is perceived by the class member. And you have to share that with them in a way that says, look, I know you're trying to help, but you actually were so loud, it sounded to me like you were yelling at so-and-so, and they may feel that too. I know that's not what you want to do. We're going back to psychology. Try and put it in a positive term. At a weekend I was doing, some friends of mine, Christy Jacobs and some friends of hers, they had a guy with them who had never square danced. So they set him up in a tip with a whole bunch of angels. So he was the only person who never danced, and he was just going to try and go through. Excuse me. Well, one of the girls did not get in the tip, one of the dancer girls. Well, next thing I know, everybody he was doing great. The guy was doing great. Everybody was helping him. In the meantime, this girl was on the outside yelling, "Go there, go there, go there!" And she was yelling and screaming at him and I actually said over the microphone, "Leave him alone. He's doing fine." And she realized then that she had gotten so excited she overcompensated. I would not normally do this, but I didn't. He was doing great. I didn't want to upset him, and I knew her well enough so I could then go to her afterwards and say, "Look, I didn't mean to yell at you, but you didn't realize how loud you sounded and how actually angry you sounded." So you have to share it with them. If it's a student, you go and you say, "Look, I know you're trying to help, but sometimes people remember better if they figure it out on their own." That you can use that line with an angel too. People remember better if you give them another second and figure it out on their own. And they will be able to then put it into their brain. If you help them all the time, you're actually not helping them. So those are kind of positive lines that you can use over and over and over again, because people will forget. They really do want to help. Actually, there was a hand over here somewhere. Oh, there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Harold Rose from Asheville, North Carolina. One of the things that I think maybe we need to, that I do at home, is I do a little education on angels. I tell them that your responsibility and what is to be available, and let me do the instructions. And sometimes if they get a little bit too much talk on the floor, I say, "Please let me do the instruction." And usually on the second night, I'll just be doing something. They'll be circling to the left, and I'll just say, "Oh," like I'd forgotten, and take the needle off. And then I'll say to the students, "I forgot to tell you this, but you notice that the dancers, the angels, will not talk to you while they're on the floor. They've already learned that they can't talk to you and listen to me at the same time. So they're not being rude or ignoring you. Serves two purposes. It tells them to listen. It tells the angel to keep their mouth shut."
Reminds them subtly. That's very good. I use the line that, when they're talking, is like, "Let me talk. That's what you're paying me the big collar bucks for."
John Colton's another thing you do when you orient your angels, remind them that the best way they can help is to be where they belong with a smile on their face and a zip on their lip.
Bill Forward from Maui again. I have to bring Bill Peters up one more time, but Bill Peters had a sheet, an angel teaching sheet, and he actually he was a very meticulous man, and he used that sheet to train his angels before he even went. The other thing I want to comment on is and I like Betsy using a coordinator or somebody else. Pick somebody in your club that is the best mediator you know, and on my club, it's a president-run club, and my president of our club is my wife, and she's the one that handles all problems because she's very good at it. But pick somebody who's good at handling the problems and let them know. It's like Crocodile Dundee's Wally. You tell Wally what the problem is, and Wally tells everybody else, and the problem goes away.
Yeah, that's good. The clubs I work for, the gay clubs I work for, they have the term that they use, and it's kind of a neat term, is archangel. So they have all the angels, but the head person who's kind of in charge of the class and talking with the angels or whatever is the archangel. They handle the administrative duties. That takes that off of my shoulders. I can then be showman. I can then be teacher, showman, or whatever. One of the things I was thinking of as we were talking about how to talk to the angels and stuff, this is part of showmanship, because part of showmanship is how you deal with people and how you present yourself and how you make them feel good. That is all showmanship. It's psychology, but it's how you present yourself. So that's all part of the package deal. Any other comments? Yeah, I got one here.
I'm Linda Maris from San Diego, and I just had a quick way of addressing the handhold if it's too tight. What I have told gentlemen is the way to check if they're holding too tight is if they look down at their thumb and they see their partner's hand is turning white around it, that's too tight. And, you know, it usually works pretty well because then they have a way of checking and they can adjust their hand on mine until my hand isn't white anymore, and then they say, oh, that's okay. So it works pretty well.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Showmanship. For the tape, I unbuttoned my cuff and rolled up my sleeve. One of the things that I do as a teacher is teach. You know, Andy talked about giving weight in turns and stuff. Giving weight is a term that people who dance understand. People who just came into our lessons, that if you tell them give weight, they have no concept of what you are trying to tell them. Again, as a showman, etc., you need to translate it. So I usually translate it by I roll up my sleeve, and then I come out on the floor with a microphone and a willing victim, and I demonstrate, Andy, and I demonstrate about how and what makes a smooth, tight turn. Now, what makes a smooth, tight turn is not the grip of the hand, but the muscle that we all have in our upper arm. We do not need to look like Schwarzenegger to have a muscle in our upper arm. If the arm bends, you got a muscle there, because something made it bend. So you take your hand. Now, the opposable thumb is not engaged in any arm turns. The opposable thumb isn't needed. So you close your thumb up, you put the palm on the inside of the person's hand, try not to tickle, and then what you want to do is put enough pressure on that hand with your palm to try and pull their elbow towards you. They should reciprocate or do the same thing as you turn. And try not to pull the person over. Now, watch what happens if we put a little pressure on and do a smooth, tight turn. Nice and smooth, huh? Now, let's do it again. I'm pushing, he's not. All of a sudden, the turn got floppy. Now watch again. You need that pressure to know there's a live person there. The same thing works when I'm teaching in ocean waves. I teach ocean waves across palms, and the thumb has nothing to do with the turn. Now, if somebody's aiming for your thumb, close it up so they don't get it. Then what you want to do is cross your palms, point your fingers kind of diagonally at the ceiling, and push on the hand, almost like you're arm wrestling, but it's not the wide world of wrestling, thank you. So we just push. And I teach that so that we can, and then I go, and my comment, and again, this is kind of fun, showmanship, is I want two things to happen when we're doing arm turns. I want all of the dancers to go home with all of the appendages they came with intact, and I do not wish anyone to leave with thumbprints. And people will chuckle and they'll get the idea, but I've actually translated the give weight so that it hopefully makes sense, and demonstrated so they could see the difference. And that's part of it. And then I'll roll down my sleeve and go back to work.
Any other comments or questions? How are we doing on time?
I think we're just about...
It's about 10:15. We're good. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Thank you for staying awake.
And if you liked the session, please put it on your critique sheet. If you didn't, that's up to you. Thank you.